The flashing red and blue lights cut through the evening darkness like angry spirits. My hands shook as I watched 3 police cars pull up to my own front gate. My family stood frozen behind me, our peaceful barbecue dinner now forgotten on the picnic table. I could not believe what I was seeing. After 30 years of working double shifts, saving every penny and dreaming of this moment, here I was being treated like a common criminal on my own land. The officers stepped out of their vehicles with that serious look that makes your stomach drop to your boots. But the worst part was not the humiliation. It was not even the fact that my neighbors were now watching from their windows like I was some kind of dangerous suspect. The worst part was seeing her standing there at the edge of my property with that satisfied smirk on her face. That was when I realized Karen had no idea what she had just started. 28 years. That is how long it took me to save enough money to buy this piece of heaven. Every overtime shift at the plant, every missed vacation, every dollar carefully tucked away was for this moment. When I first drove through those iron gates and saw the custom-built ranch house sitting beside that crystal-clear pond, I knew I was finally home. The realtor called it a legacy property. 43 acres of rolling hills, mature oak trees, and the most beautiful natural pond you have ever seen in your life. The water sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun, and you could see straight to the bottom even in the deepest parts. Bass, bluegill, and catfish called this pond home, just waiting for a weekend fisherman like me to test my skills against theirs. My wife Sarah fell in love with the wraparound porch that overlooked the water. Our teenage kids claimed the upstairs bedrooms with windows facing the pond. For the first time in our lives, we had space to breathe. Real space. The kind of space where you can walk for 10 minutes in any direction and still be on your own land. The house itself was everything we had dreamed of during those long years in our cramped city apartment. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a kitchen that opened right onto a deck perfect for grilling. The previous owners had built it with love and attention to detail that showed in every beam and board. Hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon light, stone fireplaces that promised cozy winter evenings, and windows everywhere that framed the natural beauty outside like living paintings. But the pond was the real treasure. It came with full water rights and fishing access that had been grandfathered in from the original land grants decades ago. The realtor explained that these rights were rare and valuable, something about historical easements and water access laws that went back to the early settlement days. I did not fully understand all the legal language at the time, but I knew it meant this pond was truly mine. Every Friday evening became sacred to me. I would fire up the big gas grill on the deck, crack open a cold beer, and watch the sun set over my pond while dinner cooked. The kids would skip stones across the water while Sarah and I planned weekend projects or just enjoyed the peace and quiet that only comes from owning your own slice of the world. Those were the golden months. Spring turned to summer, and our weekend barbecues became legendary among our friends and family. People would drive out from the city just to experience the tranquility we had found. The sound of sizzling steaks mixed with the gentle lapping of water against the shore created a symphony that no concert hall could match. But I started noticing changes in our quiet corner of the world. Construction trucks rumbled past our gate more frequently. The sound of hammering and heavy machinery echoed across the hills on weekday mornings. New roads appeared where old cattle paths used to wind through the countryside. Progress, I told myself. Growth was inevitable, and at least we had our 43 acres to buffer us from whatever was coming. The first sign of real trouble came in the form of unfamiliar cars slowing down as they passed our entrance. Expensive SUVs with out-of-state plates and real estate company logos on the side doors. People in business suits walking the property lines with clipboards and measuring devices. I assumed they were just surveying the area for more development projects. I had no idea that the storm clouds gathering on the horizon were about to change everything about our peaceful life. The sanctuary I had worked so hard to create was about to become a battlefield, and the enemy was someone I had never even met. Her name was Karen Mitchell, and she introduced herself to me on a Saturday evening in late June while I was grilling burgers by the pond. I heard the click of expensive heels on gravel before I saw her marching down my driveway like she owned the place. Designer jeans, perfectly styled blonde hair, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment perched on top of her head like a crown. She did not bother with pleasantries or even a simple hello. She planted herself between me and my grill, crossed her arms, and started talking like I was a child who had been caught misbehaving. "You must be the new owner," she announced in a voice that could cut glass. "I am Karen Mitchell, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your property maintenance issues." I nearly dropped my spatula. Property maintenance issues. I looked around at my perfectly manicured lawn, my freshly painted house, and my spotless deck furniture. Everything was in pristine condition because I took pride in my home. "I am sorry, what issues are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. Karen pointed her perfectly manicured finger at my grill setup like it was some kind of toxic waste dump. "This unsightly outdoor cooking area is bringing down property values for the entire neighborhood. The smoke, the smell, the noise from your family gatherings. It has got to stop." My blood started to simmer like the burgers on the grill. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion here. This is my private property. I am not part of any homeowners association." That is when Karen's mask slipped, and I got my first real look at the entitled monster underneath. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just pure condescension and arrogance. "Listen, mister, I do not care what you think you bought or what your little deed says. This entire area falls under Meadowbrook Estates community standards. That means my community standards, and your little barbecue parties are not acceptable." I could feel my wife Sarah watching from the kitchen window. My kids had stopped playing to listen to this bizarre conversation. The whole scene felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie where the villain shows up to ruin the happy ending. "I think you need to check your facts," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "This land has been privately owned for decades. I bought it fair and square, and I have every right to grill on my own deck." Karen stepped closer, invading my personal space with that fake smile people use when they are about to deliver a threat. "I have been doing my homework on you and this property. I know exactly what rights you think you have, but what you do not understand is that rights come with responsibilities to the community, and your selfish behavior is affecting everyone." Over the next 10 minutes, she launched into a lecture about community standards, property values, and neighborhood harmony that made my head spin. She claimed that several neighbors had complained about the smoke from my grill drifting onto their properties. She insisted that my weekend family gatherings were too loud and disruptive. She even had the nerve to criticize the way I parked my truck in my own driveway. The most shocking part was learning that Karen had apparently been campaigning against me for weeks before this confrontation. She had been calling neighbors, attending city council meetings, and researching local ordinances to find ways to shut down my peaceful lifestyle. This woman had made me her personal project, and I had not even known she existed. "Here is how this is going to work," she concluded, pulling out her phone to show me pictures she had taken of my property without permission. You are going to relocate your cooking activities to the back of your house, where they cannot be seen from the road. You are going to limit your family gatherings to Sunday afternoons only. And you are going to join the homeowners association so we can properly monitor your compliance with community standards. I stood there speechless as she rattled off her demands like she was reading from a court order. This complete stranger was trying to dictate how I lived on my own land, where I cooked my own food, and when I could spend time with my own family. And if I refuse, I finally managed to ask. Karen's smile turned ice cold. Then I will take action to protect this community from your selfish behavior. Trust me, you do not want to find out what that means. She turned on her designer heels and marched back up my driveway, leaving me standing there with a spatula in my hand and smoke rising from my forgotten burgers. That was the moment I realized my peaceful ranch life was about to become a war zone. Karen kept her promise about taking action, and her campaign against me began the very next week. It started small, almost petty, but it grew into something that consumed my thoughts and poisoned the peace I had worked so hard to achieve. The first incident happened on a Tuesday evening when I came home from work to find a certified letter stuck to my front door. Inside was a formal complaint from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA demanding that I cease all commercial-style outdoor cooking activities and remove my oversized grilling apparatus from the visible deck area. The letter was signed by Karen Mitchell, HOA president, and copied to 4 other board members I had never heard of. I called the return phone number listed on the letterhead and reached Karen's voicemail. Her recorded message was sickeningly sweet, promising to return calls within 24 hours to address community concerns. When she finally called me back 2 days later, her tone was all business. "I told you I would take action," she said without any introduction. "This is your official notice to comply with community standards. You have 14 days to relocate your cooking area or face escalated enforcement measures." "What enforcement measures?" I demanded. "You have no authority over my property." "We will see about that," Karen replied before hanging up on me. The harassment escalated quickly after that phone call. Karen recruited other HOA board members to join her crusade, and suddenly I was dealing with multiple people showing up at my property unannounced. They would park at the end of my driveway and take pictures with their phones, documenting everything from my landscaping choices to the way I stored my lawn mower. One Saturday morning, I caught a woman I had never seen before walking around my pond taking measurements with a tape measure. When I confronted her, she claimed to be conducting a community impact assessment on behalf of the homeowners association. She acted like she had every right to be on my land, measuring my dock and photographing my fishing equipment. "You are trespassing on private property," I told her firmly. "I am conducting official HOA business," she replied with the same entitled tone Karen used. "If you interfere with this assessment, we will add obstruction to your list of violations." The stress was eating away at my family life. Sarah started staying inside on weekend evenings because she felt uncomfortable with strangers lurking around our property taking pictures. My kids stopped inviting friends over because they were embarrassed by the constant drama surrounding our home. The sanctuary I had created for my family was becoming a prison. Karen's next move was even more invasive. She launched a social media campaign against me using the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook page and neighborhood discussion groups. She posted pictures of my property with captions describing me as a problem neighbor who refused to follow community standards. She shared detailed complaints about smoke from my grill, noise from my family gatherings, and what she called my aggressive attitude toward reasonable requests. The online harassment was brutal. People I had never met were commenting on these posts, calling me selfish and inconsiderate. Some suggested that I should move somewhere else if I did not want to be part of a community. Others speculated about my background and motivations in ways that made my skin crawl. But Karen's most devastating move was involving my employer. Somehow, she discovered where I worked and called my supervisor to complain about my antisocial behavior and conflict with neighbors. She suggested that my attitude problems at home might be affecting my job performance and reliability as an employee. My boss called me into his office the next Monday morning with a confused expression on his face. "Someone called here claiming you are causing problems in your neighborhood," he said. "Care to explain what this is about?" The humiliation of having to defend my private life to my employer was crushing. Here was a woman who had never spoken to my boss, never seen me at work, and knew nothing about my job performance, yet she felt entitled to interfere with my livelihood because I would not submit to her demands. The final straw came 3 weeks into this harassment campaign. I received another certified letter, this time claiming that Karen had researched local noise ordinances and fire safety regulations. She threatened to file formal complaints with the city if I did not immediately comply with her demands. She had apparently spent hours studying municipal codes, looking for any legal weapon she could use against me. That evening, as I sat on my deck watching the sunset over my pond, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to be bullied off my own land by some power-hungry HOA president who thought she could intimidate me into submission. It was time to fight back, but first I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Karen had declared war on me, and I was finally ready to show her what a real battle looked like. The evening of July 15th will be burned into my memory forever. It was a Friday, and I had planned a small family barbecue to celebrate my daughter's 16th birthday. Nothing fancy, just burgers and hot dogs for immediate family and a few close friends. We had done this same celebration dozens of times before without any problems. I was standing at my grill, flipping burgers and laughing with my brother-in-law about old times, when I saw the first police car come through my front gate. My heart dropped into my stomach as the black and white cruiser rolled down my driveway with its lights flashing but no siren. Then I saw the second car, and the third. 3 police cars for a family barbecue. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it were not so humiliating. My daughter's friends went silent as the officers stepped out of their vehicles. Sarah came out of the house with that worried expression she gets when something is seriously wrong. My elderly parents, who had driven 2 hours to celebrate their granddaughter's birthday, looked terrified as uniformed officers approached our peaceful family gathering. The lead officer was professional but serious as he walked up to me. "Good evening, sir. I am Officer Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. We received a complaint about illegal activities taking place on this property. Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. "What illegal activities are you talking about? We are having a birthday party for my daughter." Officer Martinez looked around at our modest barbecue setup, the birthday decorations hanging from the porch, and my family standing there in shocked silence. I could see the confusion on his face as he tried to reconcile whatever he had been told with what he was actually seeing. The complaint we received mentioned possible fire hazards, noise violations, and unpermitted commercial food service, he explained, reading from his notepad. The caller reported that this property was being used for some kind of illegal business operation. Commercial food service. I was grilling hamburgers for my daughter's birthday. The accusation was so ridiculous that I almost laughed despite the situation. "Officer, I think there has been a serious misunderstanding," I said, gesturing toward the birthday banner hanging over our deck. "This is my private property, and we are having a family celebration. There is no business operation here." That is when I saw her. Karen Mitchell was standing at the edge of my property line, partially hidden behind a large oak tree, watching the scene unfold with obvious satisfaction. She had her phone out, recording everything like she was documenting some kind of victory. Officer Martinez followed my gaze and spotted Karen as well. He walked over to speak with her while his partners continued to examine our barbecue setup and talk quietly among themselves. I could not hear the conversation, but I could see Karen gesturing wildly and pointing at my grill like it was some kind of dangerous weapon. When Officer Martinez returned, his expression had changed completely. The serious law enforcement demeanor was replaced by something that looked like irritation mixed with embarrassment. "Sir, I need to ask you some questions about your property boundaries," he said, pulling out a different notepad. "The woman who called this in claims that you are operating some kind of food service business without proper permits and that your activities are affecting the surrounding HOA community." I spent the next 20 minutes explaining my property ownership, showing the officers my deed, and walking them around the boundaries of my land. They examined my grill, looked at our modest birthday party setup, and spoke quietly with my family members who confirmed that this was indeed a private celebration. Meanwhile, Karen had moved closer, clearly expecting to watch me get arrested or at least heavily cited for multiple violations. I could see her checking her phone constantly, probably preparing to share news of my downfall on social media. But then the tables turned in the most satisfying way possible. Officer Martinez walked back over to Karen with an expression that could have frozen water. His two partners flanked him as he addressed her in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ma'am, after investigating this complaint, we have determined that there are no violations taking place on this property. This gentleman is conducting legal activities on his own private land. Your complaint appears to be frivolous." Karen's face went bright red as she realized her plan was backfiring spectacularly. "But the smoke," she protested, "the noise, the effect on our property values." "Ma'am," Officer Martinez continued, his voice getting sterner, "filing false reports with law enforcement is a serious matter. We have limited resources, and calling us out for what amounts to a neighbor dispute wastes time that could be used responding to real emergencies." The second officer stepped forward and addressed Karen directly. "We need to advise you that continued false reporting could result in charges being filed against you. This gentleman has every right to use his property as he sees fit, within legal boundaries." Karen looked like she had been slapped. Her confident smirk disappeared as she realized that the officers were now treating her as the problem rather than me. "This is not over," she hissed at me as she stormed back toward her car. "I will find other ways to handle this situation." As the police cars pulled out of my driveway, I stood there surrounded by my family, feeling a mixture of relief and rage that I had never experienced before. Karen had just escalated this conflict to a level that crossed every reasonable boundary. She had involved law enforcement in a petty neighborhood dispute and humiliated my family in front of our friends and neighbors. But her final threat told me everything I needed to know. This was not going to end until one of us was completely defeated. Karen had just declared total war, and she had no idea what kind of enemy she had just created. That night, after the police cars had gone and the birthday cake had been eaten in uncomfortable silence, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to let Karen Mitchell destroy my family's peace anymore. If she wanted to play legal games, then I would learn to play them better than she ever could. I started my research the next morning at the county courthouse. The building was old and intimidating, with marble floors and stern-faced clerks who looked like they had been working there since the Civil War. But I was determined to understand exactly what rights I had and what authority Karen actually possessed. The Property Records Department became my second home over the next 2 weeks. I spent every lunch break and every evening after work digging through dusty files and legal documents that dated back decades. The clerks started recognizing me and offering helpful suggestions about where to look for specific types of information. The first breakthrough came when I found the original land survey from 1987. My property had been part of a much larger ranch that was subdivided when the original owner died. The boundaries were clearly marked, and there was no mention of any homeowners association or community restrictions. According to the official county records, my 43 acres were completely independent of any surrounding developments. But the real treasure was hidden in a file labeled Historical Easements and Water Rights. Inside, I found documents that made my hands shake with excitement. My property did not just include the pond and surrounding land. It included ancient water rights that extended far beyond my property boundaries. The legal language was complex, but the basic facts were clear. When the original ranch was subdivided, the developer had been required to maintain certain water access rights for the main pond. These rights had been grandfathered in from territorial days and could not be revoked or restricted by any homeowners association or municipal authority. I took copies of everything and spent my evenings teaching myself property law through online legal databases and law library resources. What I discovered made my heart race with possibilities I had never considered. The Meadowbrook Estates development, Karen's precious HOA kingdom, had been built on land that was subject to my water rights. The developer had apparently failed to properly research the historical easements when they planned the community. Every house in that development was potentially affected by legal restrictions they probably did not even know existed. My excitement grew as I uncovered more documents. The original easement language was broad and protective, written in an era when water rights were considered sacred and unbreakable. It granted the pond owner not just water access, but also protection from any activities that might compromise the watershed or interfere with the natural flow patterns. I called a property attorney whose name I found in the legal directory. James Patterson had been practicing real estate law for 30 years, and his voice over the phone was calm and professional as I explained my situation. "You need to bring those documents to my office immediately," he said after hearing my story. "If what you are describing is accurate, you may have legal standing that goes far beyond simple property ownership." The meeting with Attorney Patterson was like Christmas morning for someone who had been fighting an uphill battle for months. He spread my documents across his large conference table and examined them with the focused intensity of a detective solving a crucial case. "This is remarkable," he said after an hour of careful review. "These water rights are ironclad. Not only do you have complete authority over the pond and its immediate watershed, but you also have legal standing to challenge any development activities that might affect the water flow or quality." He explained that the Meadowbrook Estates development might have been built in violation of my easement rights. The storm water drainage, the landscaping changes, and even some of the house placements could potentially be challenged through legal action. "But here is the most interesting part," Attorney Patterson continued. his eyes gleaming with professional excitement. If the HOA continues to harass you or interfere with your legal use of the property, you have grounds to seek an injunction that could seriously impact their ability to operate. I walked out of that law office feeling like I had been handed a loaded weapon in what had previously been a one-sided fight. Karen Mitchell thought she was dealing with some ignorant ranch owner who would crumble under pressure. She had no idea that she had picked a fight with someone who now held legal cards that could bring her entire power structure crashing down. The research phase was over. It was time to show Karen exactly what kind of mistake she had made when she decided to declare war on me and my family. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and she was going to learn a very expensive lesson about the importance of knowing your legal position before you start making threats. Karen arrived at my property on a Thursday afternoon in late August with 3 other HOA board members in tow. They came in 2 cars, parked at the end of my driveway, and marched toward my house like they were serving some kind of official legal papers. I watched them approach from my kitchen window, and I could see the confidence in their stride. They thought they were coming to deliver a crushing final blow. I had been expecting this visit for weeks. Attorney Patterson had prepared me for exactly this moment, and I had all my documents organized and ready. The manila folder on my kitchen table contained enough legal ammunition to end this war permanently, but Karen had no idea what was waiting for her. She knocked on my front door with the kind of aggressive authority that comes from someone who has never been truly challenged. When I opened the door, she was holding a thick folder of her own and wearing that fake professional smile that made my skin crawl. "We need to have a serious conversation," she announced without any greeting. "This has gone on long enough, and it is time for you to understand the reality of your situation." I stepped aside and invited the group into my living room, gesturing toward the chairs I had arranged in preparation for this meeting. Karen took the center seat like she was chairing a board meeting, while her 3 companions flanked her with expressions of solemn support. "I have spent considerable time and resources researching your legal position," Karen began, pulling papers from her folder with theatrical flourish. "What I have discovered is that your property rights are not as absolute as you seem to believe." She launched into a prepared presentation about municipal ordinances, community standards, and legal precedents that she claimed would force me to comply with HOA regulations. Her research was actually impressive in its scope, covering everything from noise pollution laws to fire safety codes. She had clearly spent dozens of hours building what she believed was an unbeatable legal case. The other board members nodded along as Karen presented chart after chart showing how my property activities allegedly violated various local regulations. They had photographs, measurements, and even complaints from neighbors I had never met. It was a comprehensive attack designed to overwhelm me with the sheer volume of their preparation. "So here is our final offer," Karen concluded, leaning forward with predatory satisfaction. "You will immediately cease all outdoor cooking activities visible from public areas. You will limit family gatherings to no more than 6 people. You will join the Meadowbrook Estates HOA and submit to regular property inspections. And you will pay a penalty fee of $5,000 to cover the costs of this investigation." The 3 board members watched my face carefully, clearly expecting to see defeat and submission. Karen sat back in her chair with that triumphant expression people get when they believe they have just delivered a knockout punch. That is when I smiled and reached for my own folder. "That is a very interesting presentation," I said calmly, opening my manila folder and spreading documents across the coffee table. "But I think you might want to see what I discovered during my own research." Karen's confidence wavered slightly as she saw the official county seals and legal letterheads on my documents. "What is this supposed to be?" she asked, but her voice had lost some of its earlier authority. "These are the original property records for this entire area," I explained, pointing to the surveyor maps and deed documents, including the historical water rights and easements that have been attached to this property since 1891. I watched Karen's face change as I explained the legal implications of what she was looking at. The color drained from her cheeks as she realized the scope of what I had uncovered. Her board members leaned forward to examine the documents, and I could see confusion and growing alarm in their expressions. "According to these easement documents," I continued, enjoying every second of Karen's growing panic, "I do not just own this pond and the surrounding 43 acres. I own water rights that extend throughout this entire watershed, including the area where your precious Meadowbrook Estates development was built." Karen grabbed the documents from the table and studied them frantically, looking for some flaw or technicality that would invalidate what she was seeing. But Attorney Patterson had prepared these copies perfectly, complete with official certifications and legal annotations that made their authenticity undeniable. "This cannot be right," she whispered, but her voice lacked any real conviction. "Oh, but it gets better," I said, pulling out the final document that would end this war permanently. "According to my attorney, your development was built without proper consideration of these existing easement rights. That means every house in Meadowbrook Estates could potentially be subject to legal challenges related to water access and drainage issues." The room went completely silent as the implications sank in. Karen's 3 board members were staring at her with expressions that shifted from confusion to anger as they realized she had led them into a legal nightmare. "But here is my favorite part," I continued, savoring this moment of complete reversal. "If you continue to harass me or interfere with my legal use of this property, I have grounds to seek an injunction that could halt all HOA activities until these easement disputes are resolved. That process could take years and cost your association hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees." Karen looked like someone had just told her that her entire world was built on quicksand. The confident HOA president who had marched into my house expecting total victory was now staring at documents that could destroy everything she had worked to control. "So here is my final offer," I said, echoing her earlier words with obvious satisfaction. "You will immediately cease all harassment of me and my family. You will publicly retract all complaints and social media posts about my property. And you will ensure that no HOA member ever sets foot on my land again without written permission." I leaned forward and looked directly into Karen's eyes. "Because if you do not, I will use every legal right I possess to make your HOA disappear completely. And based on these documents, I have more than enough ammunition to do exactly that." Karen Mitchell, the woman who had made my life hell for months, sat there in stunned silence as her entire power structure crumbled around her. The hunter had finally become the hunted, and the predator was about to learn what it felt like to be prey. The aftermath of that confrontation was even more satisfying than I had hoped. Karen and her board members left my house in complete silence, carrying copies of the legal documents that had just destroyed their position. Within 48 hours, I received a formal letter of resignation from Karen as HOA president, along with a written apology for what she called misunderstandings about property boundaries. The changes in neighborhood dynamics were immediate and dramatic. Word spread quickly through Meadowbrook Estates about the legal bombshell that had been dropped on their HOA leadership. Karen's social media posts about me disappeared overnight, replaced by damage control messages from the new board leadership trying to distance themselves from her failed campaign. The most satisfying part was watching Karen's social isolation unfold over the following weeks. The same neighbors who had supported her crusade against me now avoided her like she had some kind of contagious disease. Her credibility was completely destroyed, and her authority evaporated the moment people realized she had led them into a legal disaster that could have cost everyone thousands of dollars. 3 board members resigned within a month, claiming they had been misled about the legal risks of Karen's harassment campaign. The new leadership reached out to me through Attorney Patterson, offering formal assurances that there would be no future interference with my property rights. They even offered to pay for an independent survey to clearly establish all boundary lines and prevent any future disputes. But the best part was returning to my peaceful evening routine by the pond. That first Friday after Karen's defeat, I fired up my grill with a sense of satisfaction that no store-bought meal could ever match. My family gathered around the deck for our traditional barbecue, and for the first time in months, we could actually enjoy ourselves without looking over our shoulders for unwanted visitors. The neighbors who had initially been swayed by Karen's propaganda began stopping by to apologize for their behavior. Several admitted they had never really understood the situation and had simply trusted Karen's version of events. A few even asked if they could bring their families over for fishing trips, now that they knew I was the legitimate owner of the pond and all its access rights. As autumn settled over my ranch, I spent many evenings reflecting on the lessons learned from this bizarre conflict. Standing up to bullies is never easy, especially when they come armed with official titles and manufactured authority. But research, preparation, and knowing your legal rights can overcome even the most aggressive harassment campaign. Karen Mitchell taught me that some people will always try to control others through intimidation and false authority. But she also taught me that knowledge is the most powerful weapon against bullies who rely on their victims remaining ignorant and isolated. Today, as I write this story while sitting on my deck overlooking the pond that belongs completely and permanently to me, I can honestly say that every dollar spent on legal research and every hour invested in fighting back was worth it. My sanctuary is protected forever. My family has learned valuable lessons about standing up for what is right. And Karen Mitchell learned that picking fights with the wrong person can cost everything you think you control. The pond still sparkles in the evening light, the fish still bite on weekend mornings, and my grill still sizzles with weekend barbecues. But now I know that no HOA Karen will ever threaten this peace again.